So I echo your comments, Pastor Mackey. That was a powerful film. And we're so honored to be in conversation with you both. And I wanted to ask, because there was so much that was personal in that film, so many reflections, so many memories, so many efforts to repeat, just even Susanna Heschel reading from her father's diary, that connection of family. So I wonder if we might start with your own memories. And you are both people of faith. So my first question for you, or invitation rather, is to share with us your earliest memory of when your faith and your sense of justice or injustice converged.
I would say for me, my dad at the age of 10 started me watching another powerful documentary called Eyes on the Prize. I don't know if some of you are familiar with it, but that was the first time that I became familiarized with who Bull Connor was and how so inflammatory were his remarks. I remember one time my dad, we remembered watching him as he was talking about putting African Americans in a paddy wagon. And there was a blind African American standing on the wall. He said, "Don't y'all forget that blind N-word," and put him in the paddy wagon. And so my dad was teaching me at that particular point, watching that documentary, watching preachers like Fred Shuttlesworth and Martin Luther King Jr., that, son, you just can't be a good preacher on Sunday morning, but you have to also be committed to social justice and social activity for your people. So it started with me at a very early age.
And you're also reminding us of the power of film,
Yes.
right? So this, Eyes on the Prize, absolutely. It's important to see so
Right.
much. Rabbi Kahn?
So one of the things that, I didn't turn it on. Sorry about that. First of all, Pastor, thanks for putting this together. It's awesome to be together. We're spending like 3 Thursday nights together
Right.
in a row. So, and we did Torah study this last Saturday. And thank you very much for being here. So when I grew up in San Francisco, and many people seeing this film don't know that Rabbi Heschel was also on faculty of the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. And one of his disciples was a rabbi named Harold Schulweis. And Rabbi Schulweis actually officiated at my Brit Milah ceremony, the ceremony Jewish boys go through at 8 days old. He was running a synagogue in Oakland, California. He's most known for running a synagogue in Southern California. Anyway, he was sort of my grandparents' good friend. They adopted him, bought him furniture, got him all set up, and he was in Oakland, and this is in the 1960s. I was born in 69, so it was toward the end, and he went down to the Valley in LA. So my dad's story, this is another dad story. My dad, of blessed memory, was one of those Jews in his heart and his soul, but didn't really talk much about his experiences. But he always told me about Rabbi Schulweis's sermon, I think it was 64, 65, in Oakland at Congregation Beth Abraham, where he, on the high holy days, so this is when everyone is at services, and the power of a sermon that Rabbi Schulweis gave that was titled The Voice of Esau. And Rabbi Schulweis literally called out, and then by name, the Jewish slumlords in the congregation on that high holy day service.
Wow.
Yeah, and who then proceeded to get up and walk out of high holy day services and leave the synagogue forever. And my dad's telling of that story, I mean, my dad's thing was that I just wish everyone was treated the same so that we could all just be equal and get on with the business of life and not waste so much time on the residual effects and impacts of racism, anti-Semitism, and prejudice. And that Voice of Esau sermon actually inspired me when I was in rabbinic school to write my thesis about Cain and Abel. And so I spent my year of writing a thesis about where hatred comes from, where rage comes from, why it is that Cain's face fell, why it is that God said, sin couches at the door, to you will be its urge, don't go there. And so the aspects of this film that tie into that synthesize with my dad's message is what are these root causes that make people so hateful toward each other, and what are the antidotes to that? So that all comes from Rabbi Heschel's disciple, Rabbi Schulweis, that was imparted to my dad, that was imparted to me.
Man.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that startled me, and I knew it, I could do the math, but it was when we heard someone say it was only 20 years since the end of the Holocaust and the civil rights moment of the 60s.
Yeah.
Somehow they get taught in very compartmentalized ways, and we don't realize just how close, as your generational story gives us an example, of just how close these histories are, and that we're all living in this perpetual present, right? So I'm wondering, if we build on that a little bit, what was the most startling revelation for you as you watched this film?
There were so many, and as a preacher, it's hard for me to just focus on one of them. But one that stood out to me was when it was showing the gentleman who had been beaten, showing his scars. And one of the black rabbi was saying that when it comes to the African American and the Jewish community, it's not about us comparing our scars. But I thought through it that a lot of our communities don't know the scars that we bear. Hence, there is still division. Hence, there is still persons not of African and Jewish connection not knowing how we are so knitted together in this struggle for freedom, humanity, and equality. And of course, with knowing that we both have scars, we're not to blame for the scars, but we are responsible for the healing of those scars. And I think that opportunities like tonight, opportunities like we're going to share with Congregation Beth Israel, as they're likewise celebrating their 100th year. We're going to be with them at the Madison Center, sharing with them, going to Israel together. As the sister was saying, that one of the most important things we need now is to be in proximity, one with another, so we will be able to tell the stories and focus on those things that unite us rather than divide us.
Yeah. Sounds good. I think what's most shocking always is and it was toward the end of the movie, they said it was a 30-year sort of chasm. It's been more than 30 years. It's been most of my life, actually, if you think about it.
Right.
And I can only speak for the Jewish part here, which is as Jews started to see themselves as white, things started to fall apart on our side of the equation. And it's a dangerous business for Jews to see themselves not as the other. And so my generation, I'm just turned 53, so my generation started to really not see themselves as the other. We did grow up writing letters to Anatoly Sharansky, who was in the movie, sending our thoughts and our prayers and our strength to him as a refusenic Jew, but we started to really see ourselves as white. And as a result, when there was a time for decades when every city, including Phoenix, had a Jewish country club, because we weren't allowed into the country clubs. Denver, where I worked, had one. San Francisco had Lake Merced because the Olympic Club didn't let anyone in. Here, Orange Tree used to be the Jewish country club. That stopped, and Jews started getting into medical school and MBA programs and academia, and that, I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. I don't want to place judgment on it, but that was something that really triggered my energy toward our relationship, which is it's not okay for us to go this long. And it's not everywhere, but I don't think MLK and Heschel had in mind that it was about them, and I think they would be very disappointed in us for on the Jewish part of the equation for how we have not responded, not shown up.
That is a really illuminating and sobering set of statements. And I wonder, Pastor Mackey, as you are listening to your brother, Rabbi Kahn, what's coming to mind for you, and how does that inform and fuel the relationship between Pilgrim Rest and Congregation Beth Israel?
Once again, I think that as every time I get together with this man, I find myself always wanting to know more. I think just a lot of times when we just are just sitting in each other's presence, wanting to know more about them. Another powerful piece in the documentary for me was when Rabbi Herschel's daughter began to talk about a story of a gentleman saying to the rabbi that he loved them. And the rabbi said, well, do you know what pains me? And he said, no, I don't know what pains you. He says, then, well, how can you say really, truly, that you love me? And I'm looking forward to the day where I'll be able to really say, I love Rabbi Kahn.
Yeah, we're just dating now.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to.
You are sick.
I do that all the time. Well, spend 8 days with me on a bus in Israel, Richard and you, and we're all in deep trouble. No, I didn't mean to make a joke and ruin the moment. That was good. Beautiful.
That was perfect time.
Well, wait till, yes. I'm sorry, but yes.
But it just goes to show that we need to spend time with each other to truly know what pains us. And what are the non-negotiables? What are the lines of demarcation between Jews and African Americans? Because if not, we could be committing violations and causing damnable offenses to each other, but we don't know, because we haven't sat at each other's feet to explain those important pieces of our history. So once again, I'm looking forward to that time where we'll be able to truly say that we love each other, because we not only are aware of what pains us, but I want to be a part of the participation in his liberation and the liberation of the Jewish people.
Amen.
Amen. The power of proximity. And it also, I think both of you underscoring the ability to listen to revelations that are stunning and sobering and painful. And it's not to solve. I think as the very vibrant African-American Jewish speaker in the film said, it is about being able to recognize that there is so much that we can learn from each other. We don't have to compare. We don't have to, sort of compete with each other. So I'm wondering, because we live in a world that's very much fueled by the moment. It's the instant. It's the click. It's the, everything.
Yeah.
And yet what you both are talking about is a different way of approaching time. And then we have all these young people in our midst.
Yes.
This film reminds us of the trauma that young people experienced. I mean, we heard about, sort of the children who are always on the front lines of social justice, racial justice, environmental activism, all those young people in Flint, Michigan, for instance, and then we have the more international, globally known young people who are calling leaders and adults to action. So I'm wondering, how do you reflect on the urgent moment that we have right now and the potential power? And I say potential in part because we're dealing with this instant generation.
Right. Yeah.
And there's so much time that we need to spend in each other's company to learn what you both just demonstrated.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about youth and positive social change and their trauma, which is also incoming in ways that are amazing? Because we're all witness to the murder of George Floyd. We all are subjected to watching the videos of Ahmaud Arbery stumbling, Sandra Bland sitting on the edge of a road in Texas. So the youth among us are perpetually bombarded, and yet they are fearless. How do you, as leaders of congregations, as individuals who are thinking about time and company differently, how do you imagine yourself ministering to, leading, talking with youth? What are you hearing from them, and what are you saying to them?
Well, I think the immediacy of the information has traumatized them. I think social media is 50 years from now, when we look back on this era, we will know definitively, because we'll have the data and the science on it as well, that it is destroying the brains of a generation. And it's not like I'm the, sort of old man, like my parents used to talk about the television, the dummy box. It's ruining, now it looks, like the TV is, who doesn't binge watch, right? But the human brain's capacity for the information, for the negativity, and it started, I think the trigger was 9/11. I remember speaking to preschool teachers after 9/11 and saying, our kids are seeing this in real time, so when the news channels on the loop show the planes crashing into the buildings, to a child's mind, it's as if it's happening in real time over and over and over again, and imagine what that is like. That's what's happening with social media. At a young age, kids see things over and over and over again, and now they're even making the content over and over where it just repeats in a loop. So our job is twofold. Number one is to really look at the issues of immediate gratification, delayed gratification, very carefully. Number two is, we can talk about all we want monitoring their social media content, and I'm not so sure we are capable of, our brains aren't working as fast as theirs. But number three is giving them the opportunities and not giving into the temptation of when kids come to camp in the summer in Prescott, we don't allow electronics. We take the SIM cards out of the phones, and then they try to break the rules, and then we catch them. And it's they don't realize that the reason why it's the 4 best weeks of their year is because they don't have access to it. They actually have to go outside and create something, and rough and tumble play, and having fun, and physical activity, and all the things that are the antithesis of the internet. So how do we minister? I'm not sure if I'm the one to do it, but my job is to find the people who are close enough in proximity to their age and empower them. Like, we have I'm so proud of our students who are becoming school teachers, social workers, going into academia, or at least seeking the mentors. Like Dr. Brown, I'm sure you have lots of 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds who keep coming back for more check-in with you. But now I need to figure out a way to get them to serve the community. I think it's great if they want to teach at a public school, but we need soldiers. We need these kids who grew up in our system to now become part of that system, because they'll be a much more influential leader than I can be. And last part, my daughter who's here, and I don't tell her this enough, but she was in Seattle in 2020, and she was marching and had the thing with the gas mask and the gear, and I was so proud of her. for doing that. And I didn't tell her enough, but I was really, really super proud of her for being a social activist and not being a wimp like her dad. And she even got like hit with a rubber bullet at one point, and I didn't freak out. I was like, actually, it's thank God nothing bad happened, but it was sort of a scar of pride in some ways. Anyway, enough. But there are people that, we're getting old. You're not, but I am. So we have to empower the generation that you're teaching.
Just to add another layer to that, unlike me growing up where you sat down and you listened to your elders, our young people are not wired that way. When I was working with Young Life many years ago before becoming a senior pastor, he's explaining to them.
I'm just giving you the
Jewish
that's
version.
Like Nifty.
Okay, Nifty?
Nifty.
Okay.
National Federation of Temple Youth.
Okay, so when I was working for the Christian version of Nifty, there was a phrase that we learned as youth workers. They said that if you're going to be effective with working with youth, you have to earn the right to be heard. Mm-hmm. And that has always stuck with me. I wonder if we have really earned the right in their minds to be heard. And the way that you earned the right to be heard was showing yourself to them. As the statement goes, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Mm. And until we show young people today, once again, that we love them, that you're more than just another number for my Sunday school class or another number for a Bible study class, that I'm trying to develop a real, genuine relationship with you. I think only then, after we have earned the right to be heard, that then they will begin to want to listen to these stories that are much needed, because we know knowledge is power. And I think that we're really going to have to use the mediums that they're using, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the TikTok. I mean, TikTok today, everybody's using TikTok. And if it can be used for sinister means, I believe that it also can have great things in store for us to save them and secure their futures. And I think we can utilize those mediums as well.
Thank you. So I want to ask you a question now about who we didn't see and who we didn't hear from.
Certainly.
And I'm going to invite you to, I have a question, but I'm going to invite you to tell me who you didn't see and who you think we didn't hear from in that story and how that matters, and any thoughts you have in that regard.
Women were completely absent except for Susanna Heschel and a couple of the daughters of. So in other words, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scripture, only 9% of all the names in the Bible are the names of women. And actually, a percentage of that 9%, they don't even have names. The daughter of, the son, the daughter of, and the wife of.
Of course.
And we don't know their names.
Mm-hmm.
And that has not changed a whole lot in 4,000 years. So I think I noticed that within the first 10 minutes. By the way, secret, I had never seen the movie before. I've seen lots of bits and pieces. But it must have been around 9% of the voices were the voices of women. These are the moms who raised their kids without their husbands at home because their husbands were out doing civil rights, or were with them but not focused on. These are the daughters who didn't have fathers because their dads were out doing their good work. I lived next door for about 10 years to Reverend Cecil Williams in San Francisco. He was our next door neighbor. And his kids were, I don't want to say latchkey kids, but they did not see, I mean, I saw Cecil as much as they did probably, because we got to go over and celebrate Christmas and decorate the tree and do all of that. But on the other hand, there are these pictures downstairs in the rec room with the pool table and the ping pong table of him and MLK and all the great leaders of civil rights. So they all sacrificed a lot, but they were also in the movement. And it must be incredibly frustrating, especially given, Dr. Brown, what you have committed your life to see that, but also know that you have this opportunity to give voice, or at least empower a whole new generation of voices of young women who are committed to the same causes, and probably with a whole different lens that is very much in need.
I found it amazing. Of course, women were truly absent from the documentary, but not in the life and work for social justice for both communities. But what I found interesting, Dr. Brown, is that this film was produced by a woman. Mm-hmm. And you would think that if a woman produces this documentary, that she would take it upon herself to say, well, since in that time period we were still suffering from misogyny and other ills of society, that we would take this as an opportunity to right that. So it makes me wonder why she didn't. Now, that's a whole nother sermon. I'm not going to get into that tonight. But suffice it to say that women for too long have been seen in the background when they've been the backbone of the civil rights movement. And going back to the first statement that was made, that if surviving lions do not tell their story, then the hunters get the credit. I just want to modify it a bit to say, if the surviving lionesses are not giving an opportunity to tell their story, then the hunters of misogyny, the hunters of hierarchy will once again get the credit. So it's always important, ladies and gentlemen who have reached some point of illumination, to tell the stories of the least, the lost, and the left out. And who has been the most least, lost, and left out than women in the movement?
All right, thank you both. There is a really, for me, Rabbi Prince's statement. Yeah. It's not enough to hope together. It's not enough to pray together, to work together. And then the greatest sin, the greatest crime, was silence. Where do you see silence living, thriving right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, the loudest voice in the room right now is the most intolerant voice. It's the most divisive voice. It's the most angry voice. It's the voice of fear. And I'm Jewish, so I have to take on some guilt. I'm afraid of certain congregants right now and their reactions, and I am overcoming that now that I'm entering this part of my life, because I can't, it's not that I'm silent, it's that I don't know what example to give, but we came down here by the generosity and compassion of the church and Pastor Mackey and Elder Yarbrough for our High Holy Days. And I did not know in 2021 that we would still, and it wasn't that many calls, but we got calls. Bad neighborhood. They'll go to a baseball game with a season ticket for the stadium that's 6 blocks away from here, no problem. Bad neighborhood. What were they saying? It's a minority neighborhood is what they were saying. Or, Black Lives Matter is anti-Israel. Why would we be going to a black church? I mean, this most, for me, offensive thing that you can say, especially in the memory of the people in the movie we just watched, is that black people are a monolith, that their suffering has somehow diverged from ours. That goes back to we feel white now. But also these tropes that are in their head. I mean, we talked about this last week. Like, there are Jews who are still mad at the Reverend Al Sharpton for some silly thing he said, I don't know, 30 years ago. Like, get over it. It's enough. Like, Whoopi Goldberg got put in timeout for something that in no way did I take as anti-Semitic, even close to, because she just said something that she's a comedian. I mean, she's a host of a television show and she's a human being. And if anyone knows, she's best friends with Billy Crystal. If you're best friends with Billy Crystal, you're not an anti-Semite. And they put her in timeout for that? I mean, so we live in this tension, and I'm kind of, I need to be me. And that will include as time goes on, and I'll have Pastor Mackey to clean up whatever mess I make. But it's time to say, and I think Ferguson really triggered a lot of this, and I watched a lot of the last two trials, the coverage on YouTube following up. I was a little obsessed with it. It's not just that it's a problem, it's our problem too. Silence is unacceptable, and silence leads to dead people. It is as they say, the silence is deafening.
Yes.
And I think if we've learned anything in the last 2 years or in the last few, the video that we saw this last few days of the two kids getting into a fight over a girl, like that's what you're, I guess, do when you're a boy in America, and how the black kid was treated and the white kid was treated, and the white kid apparently saying, put handcuffs on me too. You know, anyone who thinks this what we call systemic or institutionalized racism doesn't exist, for me, is the same person or the Jew who thinks we're white and we're safe. Like, we have to maybe just open up the history book again and remember, it's not about scaring you. We're different, and we've been treated differently over history, and so has the African American community. And it's different, but it's the same, and we have to be here for each other. And injustice is injustice is injustice.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen. You were actually, we have a joke, Rabbi, he can talk about one thing and then jump to something else and then jump to something else, but you were really on target that time.
Thank you very much. That's the nicest compliment anyone could give me.
He told me he's been working on it, so.
Well, you know, one of these days.
You did a great job.
You're a good influence on me.
I would say two things about that. Silence, if you're not going to be silent, it means you're going to have to take a side. And because you have to take a side, you're going to make some people mad. You're going to make some people upset. And going back to what Rabbi was saying, even our own parishioners, sometimes we question, even when we know it's a God moment, he's speaking to us, telling us to talk about certain issues, we sometimes step back from being prophets because we are afraid of the backlash. Because if we're not going to be silent, we have to take a stand on the issue. One of my members here came to me and said, Pastor, you ought not talk about politics. I hear you. We didn't really bring you around here to talk about politics. You're a nice, young education man. We want you to stay put there. And I began to ask myself, why? because I was ruffling feathers of some people because I refused to be silent on certain issues. And since Jesus is my example, when I look at the unsanitized Jesus, he was one who spoke truth to power, made people upset, and turned the world right upside down so that he can turn it up right side up again. That's the Jesus that I'm following. You've got to take a side. The second thing I would say is that some people are silent because they're ignorant.
Because they are?
They are ignorant. You can't open your mouth on a particular situation if you haven't done your investigative homework to be able to take a side. You have to at least know the other side of the argument, because you'll be pushed as to why you're holding that particular argument that you hold. But if I don't know the other side, then it's best for me to be quiet. What does the statement say? It's rather for you to be quiet and people think that you're ignorant than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. So some people are silent because they have not done the work that's necessary to be able to speak truth to power on these issues. It takes a lot of study. It takes, as one theologian says, that you have to keep one eye on the Bible and the other on the newspaper and bring them into conversation one with another. So I think that for some people, silence is out of fear. But I think the another side of it is because we're not willing to pay the cost of what that means to be one who speaks truth to power.
And that's leadership. The Jesus or Moses, that's leadership. That's the role, but it's also what's in your heart. And that, I think, if you're a good person, educated, knowledgeable, that we can then have the conversation that will likely make me feel probably more committed and stronger about my belief and faith and you about yours, which is great for God as far as I'm concerned, but it also gives us that ability to sit down and understand that there are opinions and ideas that are not mine, that I don't agree with, but I can still love you. Yes. And like you. And which are both hard to do. So I was thinking as you were talking about difficult conversations and lack of information and people's inability to tolerate the ambiguity between the two. And I learned early on in my career that if you're ever going to make it in this career, you have to tolerate the ambiguity. It's not as rigid, and we do see, like I said, the voices right now on the uber left, uber right, whatever you want to call the system, whether it's political, religious, or otherwise, they don't get each other. They're not interested in each other. And so, ironically, everyone becomes these sort of intolerant, robotic speakers. I mean, COVID has been a perfect example. When we talk about mask policy, for example, you're hearing talking points that you're hearing on social media and on the news. And I want to shake people and say, yeah, but what do you think? You have a brain. You can critically think.
Sure.
And yeah, there's a that's another void that we have, not a void, but another opportunity for us. I say to people, I'm not talking about politics. The Torah is reflecting on, we're humans. It's a mirror of us. The Torah has something to say about our condition right now. The Bible has something to say, and it's not so different.
Right.
And I'm not Moses, you're not Jesus, I'm not Heschel, you're
No.
But why was it acceptable for them and it's not acceptable for us? Heschel was also very well known for being vehemently opposed to the Vietnam War. Vehemently. He was enraged by the Vietnam War.
He was.
And it was all part of the social justice and economic inequality in the country, as it is still today. When you go through the rosters of who's in the military right now, these are not upper middle class white kids.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got off topic. See, you told me, you complimented me, and I went right back to the left turn. We're getting close, though. It's a work in progress.
Okay, all right. Okay, Pastor Mackey, what's your thought?
Say it one more time.
I'm wondering about your thought here in terms of, and this is the closing question for you both.
Now, hold on. You know, for a Baptist preacher,
I know,
you
I
say
just thought I'd
closing,
lay down
that-
the warning.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
I'm just laying down the warning.
All right,
We
bless
are
you.
at time. So here's the question, all right? And I hope that this is one, yet one of many conversations that we will continue to have, and shared viewing and shared thinking aloud. And I'm wondering, for those of us here in person, those who are watching the live stream, and you have talked very deliberately, both of you, about silence, about quiet, the need to know more, the need to earn the right to be in the company of others and to offer guidance and be regarded as a leader, right? What is one question, because I think it's the power of the question, the ability to ask a question, not necessarily to declare the answer. So what is one question that you would like everyone who's part of this event this evening to go out and ask for the rest of the year? One question that will fuel their engagement, their acquisition of knowledge, information, their courage to go to places of conflict and injustice. One question that you would like or hope folks might ask.
I think if I was given more time, I could come with a better question, but I think one of the questions I always ask myself, are you a thermostat or are you a thermometer? Are you one who, in the difference between the two, the thermostat changes the surroundings, the thermometer waits until the surroundings change it? And as a pastor of a leading church in this city, in this state, I have to always, when I leave from putting my pen on the parchment from the sermon, is this God's word or this Terry Mackey's good sermon? Because if it's God's word, it's going to compel you to become that change. That's what it is. Statement says, we need to become the change that we want to see in the world. And that's my prayer, is that through my preaching, through my living, that I'm becoming the change that I want to see in the world. Because the best sermon that's preached is not from here, but it's a life well lived.
Thank you. Rabbi Kahn?
My question is, what happened? What happened? What happened to us? What happened to not just Black, Jewish, African American, Jewish American relationships, but what happened to us? Why is it so difficult for us to talk anymore, and to listen, and to ask questions? Why don't we want to date and get to know each other so that we can love each other? Why are we spending so much time letting others form our opinions for us without using our critical thinking skills to create opinions that are balanced and also coming from a place of an open heart? There's a passage in this week's Torah reading that we read from Exodus. It's the story of the golden calf, which is really the greatest sin of the Jewish community in the history of the Jews. And they build the golden calf because they lose faith in Moses, that he's not coming back. And Aaron allows them to build the golden calf. And Miriam is there too. And they're all dancing and singing, having a good time, and it didn't turn out so well. because they lost faith in each other. They lost faith in God. And I think that may begin to answer some of the question, but I think underlying, Dr. Ban, your question, if I read between the lines, is we have a lot of answers. We have a lot of statements of fact, and what were conflicting truths are now just all over the map. So what happened to us? And then how can we heal? How can we come back together? Is it possible to? Of course, anything's possible. We're human beings. We've done it before. We'll do it again. But yeah, that would be the question.
All right. And on that note,
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
both. Thank you.